Hello and welcome to this session of Make Your Data Work Monday. It's my absolute pleasure to be with you today, and thank you so much for joining me. Today we're going to talk about the components of a data strategy. Now, when businesses think about a data strategy, they're really interested in what they can hold in their hands and what they can see. And these are the main objectives, what they can see from their perspective. They want to be able to see that their data has been migrated on time and without any errors. Basically, they want a risk-free implementation. Well, don't we all? You can understand that, I'm sure. We also have resulting data models, where we have business intelligence and people get the data that they want. So that's something that's quite crucial. They expect that. And they also expect the technology just to work. They don't want to have to think about doing anything technical. All they want to do is make sure that stuff just works, which is why things like Microsoft Power BI works really well, because people can just click and tick and get the data that they want. So some of the key planning that people have to think about, first of all, is what key business areas should be involved. So normally that might be operations, it might be finance, sales, marketing, so that has to be very focused. And it should not be the case that the squeaky wheel gets the oil, so the people shouting the loudest get all the data. Please don't do that to your organization. If people are quiet, it does not mean they're happy. It means they have walked away, believing that you will not give them what they want. So they've lost faith in you, and they're not going to bother telling you. So the other thing they need to think about is the size of team that will be involved in the planning and the execution of the data strategy. For each type of person, what do they need to do, and how long are they required for? And they also require regular feedback. How can they have confidence that we are on track? So they want to know that, and they also want definite milestones. What do you need to have done by when in order to make sure that things are on track? We want to identify slippage and identify it really quickly. How can we be sure that a showstopper doesn't occur just before we go live? Reality is you probably can't, but at least then we can try and de-risk and mitigate and manage as much as possible. So what is it you're trying to supply to the service? You're trying to give people data as a service, and it's like a utility. They should be able to have as much data as they need. You can also think about the data as solving a specific set of problems in that organization, not just choosing a technology, but more about giving them another tool that they can use in order to solve problems. So that's important as well. And it's also about giving them a vision for the future. What does good look like in their organization, and how can data help them? So that's important too. It's also good to agree and standardize on terminology before you start. So people might use data lake, but they mean data warehouse, or they might mean database when they mean a data lake. So there's these sort of terminological problems that people can get into. So that's always a good thing to start thinking about quite early on. So there are a few things to consider when you are looking at a data strategy. One is having an as-is or a baseline of the current estate. This is where people can become uncomfortable because we start to understand the problems better, and it also looks like things are being quite negative. But the reality is, until we solve problems and challenges, then we can't really be sure that the data strategy will be successful. They will just return to bite us later on. So we need to understand better where the organization actually is. We also need to think about metadata as well. How much do you know about the data itself? Do you have a data dictionary, a business glossary? Is anyone looking at the data? Have they looked at it for a long time? We also need to understand if there's a master data management system in place already. We would expect to be working with that. And if there's not one, perhaps we can think about starting to implement the roots of one of those. Data quality is always an issue, and it always will be. We have to try and help the business teams to understand how they can help by putting data cleansing right from the start. Data is everyone's problem in the organization. Everybody owns it and everybody suffers when it goes wrong. So you really have to make sure that data quality is in place and it's important and it's checked. We can also think about DevOps and data ops. What happens when they go live? I read recently that there's a high percentage of data science projects never go live. I could actually believe that. So if that's not in place, then how do you know you've been successful if things are not going into live? When you look at it from the product management perspective, are you delivering a product which nobody's using? And that's not a good sign. We also need to think about shadow data stores as well. Excel hiding around the place, Power BI workbooks. Whatever technology, there will be data stores lying around which people will not be able to access if they weren't perhaps on site or on the laptop, be hidden in email somewhere. So we need to think about those. It's also good to think about third-party extensions as well. They might pop up and you need to ask about those too. So we need to think about the business and IT relationship as well. Whether we like it or not, the business needs to be included right from the start. And the success of the projects depends on business involvement. We have to manage expectations. Please don't make the design document a living document. That will introduce scope creep. It will introduce misunderstandings, and it means you will have no final sign-off. So your design document should be the result of all of that thinking. So I see people putting comments and text boxes and expecting that to be an agreed, signed off mandate that's been made, but it's not necessarily understood that way. So be very careful about that. One thing you can think about is putting forward a cloud centre of excellence. Alternatively, you may want to think about the Gartner Business Intelligence Competency Centre framework. These are processes of continuous transformation to help you improve, inspire and implement positive data-driven advancement in your organisation. The reality is that data is more than a byproduct of a business activity, it's more than a byproduct of a business process. It's now a very active part in what people are doing as part of their everyday roles in businesses. We are information and knowledge workers, whether we like it or not. But by putting in a cloud centre of excellence, that hopefully helps people to point forward in the direction that they're going. Now, cloud centres of excellence are very useful as a framework for getting people behind projects, because that does not always happen. So when we think about the cloud centre of excellence model, usually we think about three separate budgets. One is a cloud migration budget, one is a technical debt repayment optimization budget, and the other one is the education budget. So when we look at cloud migration, often that can absorb a lot of technical debt as long as it goes along, as it proceeds. So we don't want the cloud migration to absorb the technical debt as well. Both things should be treated separately. That means the cloud migration is more likely to be successful. If the reason for something going wrong is technical debt, then that has to be called out. It's coming back to what I said earlier. If you don't look at the challenges faced by the organisation, then you can't be sure that you're identifying and parcelling out the technical debt as well. The third debt is the education budget. Both of these items will require getting your team on board with what you're trying to do, and education is an important part of that. Some of that can be technical, some of it can be workshops and just getting people together. Another important thing to think about is assumptions. The sign-off process is crucial. You need to get your business teams to sign off against things like data cleansing. You need to get the business to sign off to say who's responsible for what. Roles and responsibilities are important. The business could accept a degree of tolerance for error migration. Doesn't always happen, but that's a good thing to think about as well, because at least then you can think about sampling the data and trying to get sign-off to say that the data migration or the business intelligence project has actually been successful. One final thing to think about is data puddles. We talk about data lakes and databases. We don't talk about data puddles. Those are shadow IT and shadow data sources. Things like Excel, Access, Power BI that's hiding around the place. We talk about big data, but the reality is that little data is also very important as well. So that's another crucial aspect to think about when delivering your data strategy. And with that in mind, I want to say thank you very much for joining me for this rather short session. This is an important topic, and I'd like to talk more about these things in detail as we proceed through our sessions in this Make Your Data Work Monday season that we're doing. But this was just to give you a flavour and an overview of the sort of things that you'll be looking at in the future. And thank you for joining me today.